Hey there, welcome to episode 148 of the Cafe Genius Impresario's audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo, as usual. We are recording this at 4:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here in the greater Vegas area on this Friday, December 26, 2025. An entire week of shows across my various audio program productions with the same exact title, which is exactly this, Retrospective 2025. Every episode this week I recorded at a reasonable time to publish it in the morning, but this being the end of the week, the day after Christmas, if you celebrate it, I got to be honest, I didn't really celebrate it too much. I didn't really celebrate it at all. Stayed in town, chilled at home. But if you are like me, Friday, the day after Christmas, you're like, I'm not going to rush. I'm going to take a little time for myself and relax and enjoy the day, I guess. So today's episode, which is normally published on Fridays, is to be published a little bit later on a Friday this time around. The Retrospective 2025, the entire idea was to look back not at episodes, but at the general topics that I talk about through the year gone by. And this is the final full week of the year. So this, in fact, is the final episode of 2025. The year begins next week. And so on Friday, that will be January 2nd. If I'm not, let me make sure I'm not going totally nuts here. Yes. So our next episode will be in 2026 anyway. So that worked out. A couple of the other programs earlier in the week will be having their finales for the year. But we all did our retrospective this week. So this week, for this episode, Retrospective 2025. If you're not familiar with Cafe Genius by now, in the other shows I did a little bit more background on the name, but on the nature of the program. But this program is about our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem in the greater Vegas area. There are a few other aspects of it that are kind of interesting. It's a platform for experimentation and observation of our ecosystem, some deeper thoughts, conversations, trying to do some unusual things. It started with the pitch workout room in 2022 and has been slithering along since then. The goals for 2026 are basically the goals for 2025 moved into the future. So I've already touched on that, so I don't spend any time talking about this. The Initiative 2025 is now Initiative 2026, getting people interested and to respond and so on. I do touch on that a little bit. I think it's one of it's the Achilles heel of the Vegas environment in general. So we'll have to see about that. Anyway, Cafe with two Fs, inspired by Cafe Centro in San Francisco, a coffee shop that is no longer with us, unfortunately, but its tagline was where startups start. So it was very near what is today the Oracle ballpark. It used to be the Pac-Bell ballpark, AT&T ballpark, the baseball thing. But it was situated in an actual park called South Park, not two words, South Park. Trees, grass, picnic tables. I had been there several times when I was living in the Bay Area, and it was a nice spot. I've contended many times that Vegas needs several Cafe Centro hangouts for its alleged startup scene. In fact, that's something I'll talk about it more in a future episode, but that's something on the asset map, which I think is actually important, is a social co-working. This is not new, but it's something that really I don't know if anybody really underscores it as a resource or as an asset in a entrepreneurial ecosystem, much less an entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. But anyway, yeah, Cafe Centro. Then you got the Genius Lunch from the Downtown Project days. It was people who were participating in the Downtown Project would take some time now and then in an ad hoc lunch gathering. I was never part of the Downtown Project, but because I was so integral to the deeper meanings component, I was traveling so much for Intel and the Maker Innovator Group. So if I was in town, I would get get an invite. Hey, you want to join up for one of the lunch gatherings this week, and so on. So they were very ad hoc, very casual. To me, what I have recognized and presented is that the Genius Lunch concept was a substantially lighter weight way to stay in contact with and to meet new and to converse with existing entrepreneurs and innovators in the ecosystem here to see who's doing what, how things are going, anybody need anything, anybody noticing a problem. So it's a way to kind of check in with people without the super heavy weight of an all-day meetup, catering lunch, and all the other aspects of some of the stuff we have today. So I have proposed a Genius Lunch meetup. Getting the word out was very tricky, and getting responses from people, and again, I will comment on this later in this episode, getting responses from people was impossible. So essentially, the people that I reached out to are not to be invited again. It's simply not worth it. So we'll find a new crop of geniuses to have lunch with. And finally, the show, the Cafe Genius Impresario. So that Cafe Genius is a many-faceted thing. Impresarios was spelled with two S's, which is a correct, though not so common spelling. Impresarios are the people doing cool things here and nearby in the ways of entrepreneurialism and innovation. So if we are not interviewing or having conversations with them, and it's been a long time since we have, we're talking about them or about things that would be of interest to them. And since I consider myself one of those impresarios, I try to represent. So on all of those notes, hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains those show notes, including a brief summary of one long sentence, which I will read. The links are the usual. I was pondering adding in a few links, but these are things we've talked about and we'll talk about again if there is a link involved. So we'll keep it light for today, but the links are the usual two, shameless self-promotion. And then we'll get to the rest of the show. The show got long. I wrote it. I usually write the show out ahead of time in a bulleted list. So I usually do topic, section, topic, whatever, and then 3 items, rule of 3. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 sections, 3 bullets each. 18 talking points. So we better get to work. Let's get started so we can get finished and you can get on with your end of year celebrations. The summary of today's episode, the final full week, 2025, seems like a fine time to publish an episode looking back, not at the episodes of the year, but how we have seen the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem evolve for better or worse. The links, as always, cafegenius.org is the homepage, the primary point of publication. Eventually, I'm not even going to comment anymore until it looks nicer, but keep it handy. CAFEGENIUS, no spaces, cafegenius.org. And the host, that's me, profile page linking everything. I write host in all capitals because if I ever have a guest, I want to make sure that people will see a guest link of some sort or links so that they'll know they're about or related to or references to a guest or guests. So that your host's profile page linking everything is available as it has been for years at buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. That's me, DANHUGO. Buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. And don't forget, Buy Me an Update. It's published on Monday mornings. It appears first on buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo/posts. Then it gets published in the usual places like 2 hours later. It's named because I used to publish it only on Buy Me a Coffee. But now it's available, as all podcasts are, wherever you find your podcasts. I should make sure the reach is as far as possible. But generally speaking, there's an RSS feed. You'll find it all there linked on the profile page. YouTube, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, RSS feed. That's a good start. Considering I'm just somebody, I'm not nobody. I don't know if I'm somebody. That remains to be seen. I've checked frequently. I have no halo, so I'm not somebody with a capital S here in Vegas. All right, let's keep it simple. This is not a research presentation. That will come in 2026, to be honest. We actually want to collect and analyze data and so on. So there's actual interestingness coming. This is purely subjective consideration, a look back. For now, we can mull over some of the things we have talked about on this program through the year, along with some of the headlines and common themes you may have noted throughout 2025. On the episode front, we continue to produce our weekly episodes. Still haven't climbed back into the guest pool. That is, we haven't tried to get people to come on and join the conversation. But that will change in 2026. I wrote 2025. I was being temporarily insane there, I guess. Or at least we will try to change it. We can only ask. All of our episodes through the year, this year, 2025, and in fact, all of them, have various contemporaneous links and facets of any particular topic. So feel free to flip through any or all of those for the receipts of positions, commentary, references to specific incidents or pieces of data or reports and so on. There's a particularly interesting one about, I think it was like yet another study about another study that was put out by somebody at UNLV about the ecosystem. And it's the same sort of uninspired survey. That's one of the reasons I'm a fan of or a proponent of the notion of a rolling introspection. So we don't get one study every couple of years of a couple of hundred people and then call it a day. In the meantime, did the ecosystem get bigger and or better through 2025? I honestly don't know. If we listen to what people are saying, or more likely posting on LinkedIn, things are better than anyone has ever seen before. Such hyperbolic commentary, hyperbolia. If we look at tourism numbers and unemployment numbers and housing and whatnot, the economy of Southern Nevada may not be the completely solid foundation on which to rely for our ecosystem to thrive. And then things like meetups and gatherings and discovery and awareness and enabling and encouraging the continued evolution of our ecosystem and all the other things. I don't really know. I just don't know. Gotta add one word in there. Okay. Someday I hope to publish my notes as part of the episode prep. So there's a transcript automatically generated on YouTube, but I would like the notes to figure in there. Sometimes they're interesting. You can see how the sausage is made, I suppose. But yeah, so depending on where you look, you may believe that everything is awesome. And I occasionally will see a quote from somebody. I've stopped engaging with people in real life around these sorts of things, but I'll see a quote or a statement or hear someone in a podcast or something. They're, Vegas is going to blow up. This is awesome. It's amazing. Things are really, and you're like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? So how about Southern Nevada? What's up here? Most of the news about our part of the state, if you happen to live in Greater Vegas, you may or may not. So at least my part of the state, I live in the city of Las Vegas proper, in the northern part, near a street, if you heard that. These come from our local media outlets like the Review Journal. The news comes from our local media outlets like the Review Journal and the Las Vegas Sun. We have some TV, quote, TV news stations. Not sure how many people actually watch them on TV. It might be a non-trivial number, but they also publish content on YouTube and they have websites and so on. So those are additional resources. The statutory papers of record, Review Journal on the right, Las Vegas Sun on the left. And then there are a number of independent efforts. In fact, the Nevada Independent, the Nevada Current, and many more. And then some focal papers like Nevada Business, I think it's Business Journal, LV Business, whatever. There's a whole bunch with their independent or their various focal efforts. Right? If you read the Real Estate Times, is not going to get too much into tech startups. Maybe they will. Who knows? They do a fine job of getting the word out, though, sort of. Best to consume them all, though, for things like the Hollywood 2.0 stuff that failed again in a special session mid-year, the state of the fun economy, real estate crime, the usual stuff. So these are the sorts of things that make headlines or get deeper dives. How are those Cybertrucks working out for LVMPD? We don't get quite as much coverage for that. I want to say it's Channel 3 that tends to do a little bit more creative outside the box reporting. They've even reported on, I think it was a hackathon winner. So I think it's Channel 3 that does a little bit more pro action in that area. I shouldn't know that. I shouldn't be able to call out one TV station. It should just be a thing. Like, oh, we cover all kinds of cool stuff in Vegas because there's all kinds of cool stuff going on. tourism is down for the year. That's not a surprise. The big question is whether Formula One in November and the upcoming and traditionally crowded New Year's Eve celebrations around Vegas will be indicators of a turnaround of sorts. Is the summer slowdown done, which started in January, February? Unfortunately, most news commentary concerns the Strip whenever anybody talks about this, and tourists in town to consume gaming and entertainment and whatnot. There on the strip, and of course, ProAction has been around inviting more people to come to Vegas with promotions and advertising. Thanks LVCVA, the Convention and Visitors Authority. Not to mention locals discounts. Those are discounts extended to people who live in Vegas. Show your ID, proof of residence. They've been extended into 2026, so you know they're doing something. What we do not hear about, and by the way, pardon me, spending money locally is fine. That is, it's part of an economy, so that's totally fine. Getting people who live in a part of a place, if I live up here in the northern part of Vegas, it takes me 20 minutes to get downtown. I can hang out downtown for bus fare, 20 minutes on the bus. If I had a car, I could drive. Then I would have to pay for parking. So take a bus, $2 each way. So I should not be considered a primary component of the economy, however, because I'm adding to the churn of money. Not a bad thing, but because Nevada is an extraction economy from everything from mining to tourism, we really want to have those tourists coming into town. Even though there is a focus on diversifying the economy, so it's not completely dependent on tourism. When tourism goes down in the present state of affairs, that's less money coming in. So you can have money moving around. Locals spending more time in casinos and whatnot is not a horrible thing, but it could be considered a Band-Aid, especially if it's not reported as it's like construction jobs don't really help unemployment numbers because they're temporary, right? So nothing against construction jobs, but they do have to be accounted for differently. I would say that local participation in gaming and other parts of the fun economy, that's a trademark held by the UNLV Office of Economic Development, granted in February of 2025. Those should be called out maybe with an asterisk or something. What we do not hear about with so much vigor is impact on smaller businesses, though, which make headlines when they give in eventually and, after decades of operating in some cases, shut down for lack of revenue. I think one that caught my eye recently was Ocha, which was, unfortunately past tense, a Thai restaurant. And I'm trying to remember if I think I did go there once. It was a long time ago. I tended to go to like Wira, and I had been to Lotus of Siam one. Anyway, so Ocha, O-C-H-A. Obviously, that's an English or anglicized spelling. Ocha was operating for 36 years, I think it was, and is now shutting down because they don't have the business anymore. So smaller businesses are being impacted because guess what? When everybody is making less money, those locals are spending less money, right? So that's why you have to be careful how you account for these things, because there's different line items that have different impacts that then have secondary and tertiary impacts. It's important to kind of get that full picture. And Ocha just got a headline out of it. There are other businesses suffering as well. There continues to be a sense that Southern Nevada, that Greater Vegas, is going to be the next big thing. Put those in air quotes, the next big thing, when it comes to entrepreneurs and startup success. And while I am certainly not against that, I always tell people I will happily be wrong with anything I've suggested that's negative or not supportive, if it comes across that way. Trying to be honest. I have to wonder how that is going to happen based on what we are seeing today and over the past several years. Again, this year, but for a while. Posting on LinkedIn and getting a few quotes here and there in a very thin reporting, in the very thin reporting floating around that, if it's not the fun economy or whatnot, it doesn't really get press. This does not make Greater Vegas the next anything, if we are being honest. So you cannot simply say we're going to be the next. And by the way, in fairness, this has sort of died down a little bit. So we're not seeing so much overt silliness. But you cannot simply say we're going to be the next Hollywood. And then it comes true. There are things you have to accomplish first. And based on what we're seeing so far, those things are not being accomplished. So, something to think about. What about discovery? I talk about discovery a lot. We need discovery. This year gone by has seen a continued trend of news coverage around the big spends, like Ben Horowitz and his wife donating a dozen or so Cybertrucks to LVMPD, and maybe some funding for the RTC bus corridor on Charleston, real estate and gaming, and of course those tourism numbers not being what one would hope they could be, all the usual stuff. The big things, not so much interest in this startup scene, nor the smaller efforts, but for a brief human interest story now and then. The OCHA story, for example, that's not an ongoing thread of conversation about the impact of the current economic state of the state on small business. If you're not the Fontainebleau, who are you? CES is coming up, so we can comment on this based on reality post-show for 2026. But where 2 years ago, so CES 2024, 2 years ago, there was one single UNLV booth in the Eureka Park area that's in the Venetian Sands on the ground, or in the basement, I guess you could say. It's where the startups and innovators are at CES. It's where you'll find me most of the time. Best part of the show. It's where the people actually doing things are in the booth talking about the things they're actually doing. Go to the big floor, big shows on the floor, and you'll find hired guns. You'll find salespeople and hired contractors and all the rest. So the real story is in Eureka Park. So UNLV had one booth, one little 10 by 10. That was it. Last year, CES 2025, there was zero Vegas presence, no UNLV, no nothing. There are startups in Vegas. They just don't go to the CES Eureka Park section. This is our hometown show, often touted as one of the biggest regular shows here in Vegas. Certainly gets a lot of attention, and we had nothing to show anymore anyway. Maybe there was more of a presence several years ago. I remember when Joe Lombardo was coming into office, there was a plan from the GoEd to have a Vegas booth with like a super booth with little tiny kiosks. So the country pavilions tend to do this. So if you're in from South Korea gets it. There's more South Korea in Vegas for that week than in South Korea. Same with France, same with even Turkey. France, the Netherlands has a strong presence. Italy has a strong presence. And then there are different vertical areas. So if you're doing a health and wellness startup, so everybody's there. There was going to be a Southern Nevada or a Nevada pavilion, and it fell through because they didn't want to spend the money during the transition of the administration. So that's as close as I've seen it in this is the 13th year I think I'm going to CES. So great, wonderful. This to me is an indicator how things for the year will go. So for 2025, things went as expected based on those crickets, like literally nothing. Hey, did you know that CES is taking place in Vegas? Oh, that's what I've heard. Did you know that Vegas has a startup scene? That's not what I've heard. So for 2026, we shall see. So I'm going to go to CES. I'm going to hang out in Eureka Park, probably 2 days of the 4. We'll see what I see. Generally speaking, for all the claims posted on LinkedIn, a site that is explicitly closed off requiring connections and follows. And I always tell people, if I'm not following the right people, I never hear about or read about some of the things that I see on LinkedIn because they're not posted anywhere. We do an awful, this is the discovery section of this presentation. We do an awful job at enabling discovery. There is always zero successful effort expended to elevate innovation in the greater Vegas area. That's just the way it is, which does not make a strong case to back up the claims of innovation prowess. Ideally, people in and around greater Vegas would have some idea that there is so much innovation happening right in their backyard. If there actually is, so is there? Discovery is an important and still missing piece, and it's something that I've talked about many times. It's something that we can address, and it's high time somebody did. I know I always complain about this. Entrepreneurs fix problems. They don't complain about them. So it's hard when you're an army of one. Cohesion and coherence. If you're an active listener of this audio program, you remember that there was a cohesive coherence and coherent cohesiveness, cohesion, not cohesiveness episode recently. So I did an entire episode on this with a suitable title. So I just gave it to you, which you should check out. The way I've used these two similar words, they do have slightly different meanings. I am not seeing a coherent plan of action across the city of Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Henderson, and other smaller cities, Mesquite, and of course unincorporated Clark County, Enterprise, Paradise, not to mention the county itself, any areas that don't consider themselves a part of the greater Vegas or Southern Nevada ecosystem, anywhere outside of Clark County, but near Clark County. So the county, of course, and then the collaboration with GOED, the Governor's Office of Economic Development. If there is, but it looks to me like a lot of people in positions of power, or at least positions that get noticed and quoted, and to pursue big things, but we aren't quite seeing how these big things come together. So they get the attention, they say the big things, they get the quotes, but then do they pursue the big things, and do the big things happen? Do they come together? Do they fit together when they're talking about these things? Is there a coherent plan? So that sentence was not completely coherent as written. Hopefully I rescued it a little bit there. The point is, are we more interested in what people have to say when it makes us feel good? Like, oh, this place is going to blow up. I just heard it from so-and-so. Yeah. Okay. Now I will remind people I've lived here for 12 years. That is not as long as you have, perhaps. But I did move here from Silicon Valley. I moved from Sunnyvale, California to Las Vegas, nonstop. So the take home is I came here from Silicon Valley, directly from Silicon Valley. When I hear things like, we're going to be the next Silicon Valley, I can compare apples and oranges. I can say, guess what? We got a lot of work to do before you're going to make that happen. And even then. So yeah, when I hear people talking about stuff, I don't see a coherent plan coming together. All of my interactions in the auspices of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, for example, there is very little interest in supporting such things. So you're on your own, to be honest, unless you are a celebrity or wealthy. I've been saving up for a Cybertruck so I can donate it to LVMPD, see what that gets me. Then the lack, and by the way, disclaimer, I worked at Netscape, so technically I kind of worked for Mark Andreessen. For what that's worth, I'm not impressed. Then the lack of coherent message. So we had the coherence. I wrote coherent, but it's got to be cohesive because that's how similar these words are. The lack of cohesive message. It is all well and good to tell the world that Las Vegas is the next manufacturing hub, the next center of battery technology, the next hub of fintech, which is weird. I don't think you need to be in a place for, anyway. Why is it not New York or Chicago? The next manufacturing hub, the next exercise science hub, and the list goes on. Exercise, science, and health are big key industries. Messaging is fun. If you can talk about these things, you can post on LinkedIn all day, but does it make sense and does it fit with the coherent pursuit of these things? Is there coherence to message on? So in other words, if there's a plan, can we construct a cohesive roadmap that we can describe to people and that it makes sense? Is it something that other people talk about? I always talk about, and in fact, the famous episode 85 of this very audio program, Vegas is the Next Vegas, was actually a deep dive into how Silicon Valley evolved over time to become the Silicon Valley of old. I don't know about the place today is kind of a wreck, but an overpriced wreck. But if you look back in time, like a non-trivial component of the success of Silicon Valley was that people were kind of excited about what was going on in their city. There was a strong agricultural component, of course, but we did have the Stanford and the Berkeley and the University of Santa Clara private school, and then there was University of San Jose. There was Santa Cruz. So there was a lot of educational institutions. Stanford, of course. jokingly referred to as a venture capital company with a university attached to it. But the story of the founding of Stanford is even interesting. All of these things along a timeline that led to a true development or emergence of a culture of innovation. And the local press, now remember, Silicon Valley started before there was really an internet. So you had a little chicken and egg thing there. So you couldn't tweet about Netscape. You would read about Netscape in the San Jose Mercury News because we were based in Mountain View, one city away from me and not far from San Jose where the Mercury was published. So front page news was part of the development of Silicon Valley. Those days have gone away, and now we all read our favorite microblogs or view our favorite short videos that are often meaningless. But we don't really know what's going on, and we aren't really excited because we don't know what's happening in our own backyard. So a cohesive messaging around a coherent plan, I think, would go a long way. Still not quite seeing it. Part of the underlying problem in this area is the lack of awareness and information sharing at scale. Just mentioned the lack of local news coverage around things that are not the usual suspects in and near the fun economy. So if it isn't crime and politics, you're never going to hear about it. If we don't have good communication, and we do have a lack of coherence of execution and cohesive messaging. I totally botched that again. So coherent, let me say coherent execution. Coherent execution and cohesive messaging. Where does that leave us? I would wager apathetic. Nothing's happening here. I never hear about it. And if I do hear about it, it doesn't make sense because they do a horrible job of explaining it, and then it doesn't happen anyway. So we could be apathetic, or at least more concerned about the problems closer to home, like groceries and rents and general costs of living and quality of life. Like, why is there always road construction? And how do I get to work? And will I still have a work to get to? And so on. These are fantastic mentions on LinkedIn if we ever see them. But otherwise, the front page of most news outlets in the Southern Nevada area is almost always about somebody getting hit by a car, or someone non-local or sometimes local winning a prize, some celebrity signing a residency somewhere on the strip. It goes along those lines. A lot of crime and politics and fun economy. Don't forget trademark. So we have 2 more sections left. Focus, 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 focus. I have talked about this quite a bit through the various episodes this year and prior, that the attention paid to those dreams about innovation hubs and the Hollywood 2.0 thing really does mean what? That really doesn't mean anything when we look at the sorts of actions the same people take on matters like Formula One, which is an example I go to because it is simply too glaring an example to not keep referring to it. So yeah, so you can talk about innovation. Oh, we're a global innovation hub. We're the next Silicon Valley. We're Hollywood 2.0. But does it mean anything to hear people talk about these things in those optimistic ways? Those blue sky, anything is possible. If we can make it here, we can make it anywhere. Tones. But then you look at how Formula One unfolds, and you're like, is it the same people driving that? Yeah, if we rely on the powers that be to make decisions that impact the many, that's us, the odds are they will interact with and favor the few when making these decisions. And you can hear that, especially for the first 2 years of Formula One, when a lot of headlines and quotes around how, it's so successful. It was great if you were among the larger companies that made money. But even some large companies that did not make money, those are the ones that would come out and say, well, actually, yeah, that wasn't that good. Those quotes came later. So is there fallout from year 3 from the racing in Vegas this year in November? That remains to be seen. They may have squashed the loudest dissent. They did that with some of the lawsuits that were taking place from year 1. Maybe from year 1 or year 2. It's a faded memory at this point. I mean, once they're settled, it doesn't really matter anymore. They were settled privately. But grumblings are the race. The grumblings are the race is just not popular among the masses. If only we had some way to introspect the population, if we could ask them on a rolling basis, what do they think about certain things? And does it have an actual negative impact on your work? Is it harder for you to get to work? Is it harder for you to conduct your business if you're a small business owner, et cetera, et cetera? I mentioned this many times. There is no innovation and certainly no focus on the various moving parts of the ecosystem that might lead in a positive direction. And so we hear nothing about Global Entrepreneur Week, for example, even though it is a global event. So when I say there's no innovation and certainly no focus, I'm talking about media, I'm talking about information sharing, public awareness, news reporting, et cetera. So there is innovation. I think I'm often misunderstood in that regard. When I say there's none, I don't mean there's zero. I mean statistically none. Like there could be a lot more before people start noticing. But in the area of news reporting and information sharing platforms, individuals do their job. That's fine. But how do we find this stuff? The discovery component. And I looked around during Global Entrepreneur Week, for example, and I found nothing except for on the Global Entrepreneur Loss for Nevada, whatever it was. I talked about it at the time. They have a website, and that's fine. But the Global Entrepreneur Week news presence locally, essentially zero. So if you didn't already know about it, you weren't going to find out about it. Why is this? Because, for example, in this case, Global Entrepreneur Week coincides, very unfortunately, with Formula One racing in Vegas. See, it always comes to that. Formula One. Formula One is the root of our problems. No, it happens to be, and this has been true for 3 years in a row, GEW, Formula One, same time. The global event is obviously happening in other places that do not have a Formula One race running. So it's just a confluence of calendars. It always comes to that, though. So seriously, we actually do have intense focus here in Vegas on the fun economy, which is suffering from lack of tourism volume this year. So that is where the attention continues to be paid. You see how that works? Vegas has economic problems. Will Formula One race presence fix that? Well, some of the problems involve housing, unemployment. Yeah, but will Formula One fix all that? Because we can just talk about that all the time. Even when there is focus on the other aspects of the Southern Nevada economy and associated ecosystem, is it on a few key industry areas that I have referred to many times and which are listed on the LVGEA website? These are exercise and health science and technology around those, fintech, manufacturing, and I think one or two others. Key industries on LVGEA, Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, of course. And while there is nothing wrong with any of those at all, those are all fine. We should have economic diversity here. I'm not against that in the slightest. I have to wonder if the people who think the startup scene is going to blow up into the next Silicon Valley are reading about what the LVGEA actually thinks is important. The entrepreneurial scene is listed at the bottom of that page, and it's sort of oh yeah, that's right. We have a vibrant economic or entrepreneurial ecosystem or environment or whatever they say. There's almost no cross promotion in these realms, which goes to my food truck lesson that I will revisit another time. For those who are not aware, I helped to found, or I was like a managing director or whatever, of the Bay Area Mobile Food Vendors Association in the Bay Area, and then the Nevada Mobile Vendors Association here in Vegas. The Bay Area was a lot easier because people there completely understood the value of cross promotion. Here in Vegas, very solipsistic, very, at best, siloed. Why should I talk about somebody else? I should talk about me. And then I don't want to talk about me, so I'll talk about nobody. So what's the take home? This is the final section, I promise. It's I got 42 minutes on my clock, and that'll go away when I truncate silence. The take home is this. Ghosting is a huge problem here in Vegas. I barely even touched on that here today. I don't think I have at all. Ghosting is a huge problem here in Vegas, along with the halo effect. That's where people are granted credibility just because they're celebrity. They seem like a nice person. Let's follow them. Let's give the halo and see where they go. We'll go with them. The scourge of warm introductions, that's a huge problem here in Vegas. It's kind of like the halo effect at scale. And I guess I could call it the lack of knowing what is not known. Sprinkling money over a city or region cannot convert that region overnight into something it is not. At best, it can apply some temporary effects and make it look different, but turn off the money and you go back to where you started. So this goes to the coherence. This goes to the the warm introduction problem, right? Once, if you have a room full of people that already know each other, and those are the people making decisions, they all get along, they all agree. Guess what? You're going to make decisions. You're just not going to make decisions that have had any sort of challenge to them. And outside that room, there is only challenge. So yeah, that's a non-trivial concern, and I've expressed it several times, and I will continue to. If nothing else, I have seen just how bad the ghosting problem is. And by the way, that is where people do not communicate if it does not suit them, either by dropping an ongoing conversation, which happens all the time here, or simply not responding in any way, which happens 100% of the time here, believe it or not. And how this is just another indicator of the lack of a culture of innovation here in Greater Vegas. Not that there is none, back to my point earlier. Statistically, though, we need a lot more to get noticed or to make a difference. And not everyone pursues this ghosting tack, so it's not quite 100%. But the critical mass is on the wrong side of a positive future, in my opinion. No more evident than over the last year. So the last year has really been a banner year. I would honestly say things appear to be getting slightly worse. It might be the national, political, geopolitical, economic, global trade, global tourism, the local economy and the tourism effect on it, local cost of living, housing. There's any number of factors, but that has translated into a full year of what I will just refer to as less. As always, this is the final point, the final bullet item in the final section. As always, this episode is another receipt to jam onto the spike. If you've worked in a restaurant, you know what that is. For some time in the near term, when we begin to address some of these things from the ground up, I can always link to an episode without having to actually say, I told you so. I can just say, I produced an entire episode about that 2 years ago, whatever. Do I want to continue to pursue my entrepreneurial innovations in Greater Vegas? Well, there is a big fish opportunity here that is worth pursuing, in my opinion. But there's a lot of flotsam and jetsam to navigate around towards those ends. Being the big fish in a pond of filth. That's not a reference to the people. That's a reference to the infrastructure, that coherence, the cohesion, all the parts that are actually getting in the way. So that's not a commentary on like the human element. Anyway, all that said, Happy New Year. Thanks for listening. If you haven't picked up an episode or two or 147 of this audio program, then hopefully episode 148 will help you become a new listener. I get nothing if you listen other than the satisfaction of knowing that more people know where I stand on some of these things. I think it's important that more people have an opinion, even if it's differing from mine, rather than simply consuming LinkedIn posts and believing everything that's posted there. So there you go. Sounds cynical, sounds glib. If I had turtles, I would name them that. Cliff and Link, come on. Cynical and glib. Okay. Thank you. Happy New Year. Good luck, Vegas. Let's make 2026 a little bit better for a change. Take care. Bye-bye.